All right, perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. And Jim, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me fine? Is the audio okay? Just give me a thumbs up. Just put your thumb up. Everyone can hear me. Excellent. Okay. So this is the topic today is saving your life with wearable technology. This was recorded as an APCUG talk on November the 2nd, 2019. So it is available for you on the web, and we're also recording this meeting because there's a lot of technical information in here, and I thought that it would be, you may want to watch it again. The goal of this presentation, hold on a second here. I just want to move this over. The goal of this presentation is to teach you today 2 common medical conditions that will lead to incapacitation or stroke. How wearable technology can help you identify these conditions and seek medical help. So the goal today is to teach you 2 things and to tell you how you can seek help for both these conditions. Now, as a disclaimer, because I am a physician, but have been retired for many years now, I have to put a disclaimer in so I don't get sued. And so these are not the views of any organization. They're not meant to be personal medical advice. And you should always check with your healthcare provider before changing any treatment plan. The people in this presentation are fictitious and do not portray any member of our community. So that's the disclaimer. This is a message that I got from, I gave this presentation at a resort about a month ago. Actually, it's probably more like 2 months ago. And the person listening to the presentation followed through with my advice and ended up in the hospital because he developed some cardiac problems. And the doctor in the emergency department and on the ward said if he hadn't followed through and been monitored as I had suggested, he would be dead. So he wrote me a very nice letter from the resort, and they wrote me a nice letter from the, he wrote me a nice letter. I actually got to meet him, and he thanked me so much because he followed through with some of my suggestions, and indeed it saved his life. So this is a life-saving talk. Now, one of the things we're going to talk about today is wearable technology, and I just wanted to see. Here. Is about wearable technology, and this is going to be a big topic. Global wearable technology medical devices are going to be about 66 billion by the year 2026. This year we're spending a huge amount of money on wearable technology, and this has to do with ear devices, watches, and a lot of different devices that will monitor your health. And if you go to Best Buy, you'll soon see large parts of their store now is being converted all for wearable technology. If you look at the worldwide wearable market and you look at the smartwatch market, you will see that in the last quarter of that would be the last quarter of 2019, Apple sold 29.5 million smartwatches in the quarter, and this was a 200% increase over the market the previous year. So you're seeing a huge increase in wearable technology, and this is going to continue over the next few years. Now, the players in the wearable technology market are the following. Of course, you probably know there's Apple. Apple is certainly one of the major players, but there's also Fitbit. And Fitbit, of course, was just bought by Google for $2.1 billion. And then we have Garmin and the other, and even coming down to Samsung. So these are all the players in the wearable market. But clearly the leader right now is Apple. probably followed by Samsung, but soon to be changed by Fitbit. So all you people wearing Fitbits, the whole concept of the Fitbit and how it's going to be how it's going to perform is probably going to change a lot as Google changes and moves the wearable technology of Fitbit into more of a medical device. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about AliveCor as a company, and this was their Dr. Shribati was one of the major partners in AliveCor, and she just got hired by Fitbit to come and run up and develop the medical devices, the Fitbit medical devices. So we're going to talk a little bit about a fictitious person. And I want you to, as we go through the slides, I want you to think about Mary. I made Mary up as somebody who could be in your resort or your community. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mary, what her history was, and then how she got into trouble. So Mary's a 74-year-old widowed lady. She lives full-time at Silver Ridge RV Resort. This actually is the RV resort I live at in Mesa. Now, Mary has lived at Silver Ridge for 7 years, and she's won the hearts of all residents. She lives by herself in a park model with an Arizona room and has a very good friend across the street who she goes walking with every morning. Now, Alice, who is in the bottom right-hand corner, and Mary walk around the perimeter of the resort and then have a cup of tea around 10 o'clock. Mary's very active and is a member of the pickleball club. And of course, her highlight every Monday morning is our computer club meeting. I had to put that in. It's literary license, right? Mary has been widowed for 12 years. She has a daughter who lives in Palm Desert. She comes to visit Mary every month. Mary's pretty good computer skills, and she Skypes frequently with Meg. Mary doesn't drive anymore, and she uses Uber for transportation. Now, Mary has a family doctor, Dr. Jones. She likes Dr. Jones. She sees him twice a year. She's a bit overweight. She has a bit of high blood pressure, but on her last exam, everything checked out okay. Now, on July 2nd, Mary was walking home from the mailroom, and she felt a little bit lightheaded. And she had no chest pain or any palpitations, but she sat down on the grass. And John, in his golf cart, came along and said, "Are you okay?" And Mary said, "Well, I had felt a little weird," but she said, "I'm fine now." And she got up, and he said, "Nope, I'm taking you home in the golf cart." So anyway, Mary gets in the golf cart and goes home. John checks on her that night, and she's fine. But of course, Meg found out about this, and she has to go and see her doctor tomorrow. So when she sees Dr. Jones the next day, he checks her over in the exam room, and of note, her blood pressure and pulse are normal. So he says, "You know, it was only for a few seconds that you felt a little bit weird." Then she said, he says, "I think what we'll do is just wait and see if this happens again," which I think is quite reasonable. So a couple of weeks later, Mary was cooking supper, and she felt a similar lightheadedness. And she felt that lasting for about 30 minutes. She had no chest pain or palpitations, and she sort of felt a bit weird, so she sat in her lazy boy chair. She saw Dr. Jones, who again found nothing wrong with her, and he did an ECG, which was normal. Now, because this was Mary's second episode, he recommended that she have some blood work and some more investigations. He thought, 2 episodes of this, we better check this out a little more. So she said, "Well, Meg's coming on Friday, and I want to do some baking. Can I do this next week?" And he said, "That's fine." So on Wednesday morning, about 2:30 in the morning, Mary got out of bed to have a pee. And while getting off the toilet, she got another attack. And she fell to the floor, and she heard a terrible crack in her hip. And she was wedged between the toilet and the shower. So she couldn't move, and she called for help. But of course, nobody came. There's nobody there. So Alice found Mary at 9 a.m. when she came for a walk. And when the ambulance arrived, they found Mary was cold. She had a very low pulse and a low blood pressure. On arrival to Banner Hospital, she had a temporary pacemaker inserted in the emergency department. She was then transferred to the intensive care unit where she was stabilized and had a permanent pacemaker put in. Her hip was repaired. To the delight of everyone, Mary made an uneventful recovery, and she's back doing her daily walks with Alice, but has given up pickleball. All right, so what did we learn from this? Well, I want to talk about heart problems. Now, we all know that things can go wrong with our heart, and there's a bunch of things that we could talk about, but we're not going to talk about any of these things. On the bottom right here, we have what we call coronary artery disease. This is where, you know, your arteries get plugged up. You might need bypass surgery or taking cholesterol medicine. Your doctor knows about this, and many of you have this condition. We're not going to talk about this. Over here, you'll see the heart pumping away. Your heart actually has 4 valves. And of course, as we get older, you might need a valve job, but we're not going to talk about valve jobs today. Sometimes your muscle of your heart can get infected with a virus, and this actually is COVID-19. This is one of the complications of COVID-19, is the virus actually infects the heart muscle, and you actually can die of that, and that's called myocarditis. But we're not going to talk about that today. What we are going to talk about is we're going to talk about the electrical properties of the heart. Now, I've made this so simple. I've given this to many clubs, and they all get the principle here. I wanted to make it real simple for you. Medical students normally take about 5 years to learn this, but I'm going to teach everybody in this room what you need to know in 30 seconds. Now, everybody knows what a circuit breaker is. On the right-hand side, you will see a circuit breaker, and you know that if you turn on the circuit breaker, the lights go on in your house. If you turn off the circuit breaker, the lights go off. So your heart has 2 circuit breakers. It has the first circuit breaker here and a second circuit breaker here. And the main electrical line coming into your heart comes up here this way, and it goes to circuit breaker number 1. And this then from circuit breaker number 1, the electrical wiring goes all throughout the top 2 chambers. Your heart has 4 chambers. There's the top 2 chambers and the bottom 2 chambers. So the top 2 chambers contract, and then the bottom 2 chambers contract. So the wiring goes through the top 2 chambers and comes down to circuit breaker number 1 or 2. So we have the wiring coming up to circuit breaker number 1. We have it going through the heart, and then it comes to circuit breaker number 2. Now, what happens if circuit breaker number 1 fails? As you know, as we get older, parts start to fail. What happens if it fails in the off position? Well, that's a bad thing because your heart stops, right? That's basically what happened to Mary. Mary's heart actually, she ended up with a pacemaker inserted because her heart stopped. Now, if this fails in the open position and you get too much stimulus to these top 2 chambers, this is called atrial fibrillation. So circuit breaker number 1 can fail in the closed position, or it can fail in the open position. And we're going to talk about both these conditions that are preventable, and I can help you with wearable technology. So the first thing that you need to do to help your doctor is you need to measure your pulse. If your pulse is too slow, you can get into problems. If your pulse is too fast, you can get into problems. So you need to measure your pulse. If Mary, remember the first time she had that little dizzy spell and sat on the grass, what that dizzy spell was is her heart slowed down at that particular time, because when pacemaker number 1 fails, it doesn't fail totally all the time. It's like an electrical problem in your car. It can be intermittent. So she had a temporary slow pulse, and if she had had a device like a watch that would measure the pulse, she would have looked down at her watch and she could have said, gee, my pulse is 40. And when she went in to see Dr. Jones, she could have said, you know, I felt a bit weird, but my pulse was really slow. What do you think? Bingo, that would have given him the diagnosis. Those of you, conversely, if she had had the same episode, but it had some palpitations or her heart was going very fast, then then it would have caused the same problem. Now, I wanted just to wonder, I'm going to just try something here. I haven't tried this before. This is called a poll. I'm going to launch this. Can you see this on your window now? What I'd like you to do is I'd like everyone to tick off. This is atrial fibrillation. There's 3 choices here. Just tick off, and we'll see what if everybody has ever heard of this. For atrial fibrillation, you can tick off, I've never heard of it. I heard of it, but don't really understand the condition. Or I have atrial fibrillation and I'm on treatment. So let's see if everyone could just tick off what they think their answers are. We can quickly get an idea of how everybody's, what you think. So 4 out of 10. Come on, you guys. We've got 9 people. 5. Anyone else want to just answer? Okay, so that's interesting. We have 1 person has atrial fibrillation. A lot of you have heard of the condition, and there's 1 that hasn't. Okay, that's good. So you're knowledgeable. That's great. So we'll just end that. We'll share the results so you can see the results of the poll. And we'll stop that. Get out of that. Okay, now, so let's talk about, we're talking about whether your pulse is too fast or too slow. Now, come on. So how to measure your pulse? The first way to measure your pulse is by, of course, you could feel your pulse, but this is rather difficult and often not really helpful. So we have many devices, and this is where we get into peripheral devices such as the Apple Watch or any of the other devices will measure your pulse. And if you looked at Mary, you would have saw that she's not wearing a watch. Now, there are a lot of activity trackers on the market. You can go to the store and they do a wide variety of things, but the value for seniors is to measure your pulse. We want to know if your pulse is too fast or too slow. It also does falls and emergency contact and emergency notification, but we'll talk about that another day. So with Mary, what happened with Mary? Well, circuit breaker number 1 failed, and it failed in the closed position, and she had no stimulus to the heart. And then the heart sort of reverts to a very, very slow rate, and elderly people don't tolerate slow heart rates. So this created her problem, and she ultimately fell and got a broken hip and almost died because of that. So if we could have diagnosed that earlier, particularly if she had been paying attention to her heart rate, she wouldn't have developed that problem. So this is an advantage that we can use. Now, if you look at the incidence of pacemaker insertion in the elderly, you will look at this graph here and you will see starting at age 60, if you look as we go up, you will see the chances of you requiring a pacemaker by the time you get to be 85 is very, very high. So this is why it is extremely important after the age of 60 that we monitor your pulse, because there's a very good chance that you may develop the same condition Mary has and require a pacemaker. It is very, very common as we get older. Now, if you haven't, the Apple Watch actually tells you and will notify you. It monitors your heart rate. You actually don't have to look at your watch. It will tell you. So let's talk a little bit about atrial fibrillation. This is when your heart rate is too fast. Again, it's circuit breaker number 1 fails and you get too much stimulus going to these 2 chambers, and the the two chambers of the top part of the heart there, they just quiver and they don't actually contract down. And this often as a result, this results in a very fast heart rate. You often feel some palpitations, and this is called atrial fibrillation. Now, atrial fibrillation causes blood clots, stroke, and heart failure. So you don't want this condition. If you do have this condition, then you certainly need to get it treated. One of the problems is when I make rounds in the stroke ward, is that people would come in with a fresh stroke, and the family would all be standing around and say, well, why did dad get this stroke? And the reason is he had atrial fibrillation, and he didn't know he had atrial fibrillation, but this was a preventable condition. Now, again, if we look at what is the incidence of atrial fibrillation, well, I got the same bad news for you. If you look at age 60, and then you look at the next graph, you will see that again, it goes up with age because it's the same problem. Circuit breaker number 1 can fail in the closed position, or it can fail in the open position. If it's the closed position, you need to speed up the heart. If it's the open position, then you need to slow it down. So this again is the same graph, and again, you need to know if your heart is too slow or too fast, and it's helpful to measure that. Now, the Apple Watch actually does this for you. It actually will tell you if you have atrial fibrillation. The Series 4 and the Series 5 watch has an atrial fibrillation monitor within the watch, and it actually will tell you and notify you if you have atrial fibrillation. Now, there's been a big study that when the Apple Watch first came out, there was a lot of controversy and a lot of worry that maybe it would overdiagnose or wasn't going to be accurate in the diagnosis of atrial fibrillation. However, Stanford Medical Center did a very large study and confirmed that in fact the Apple Heart study was good, and it does accurately tell you if you have atrial fibrillation. Now, I wanted to just talk a little bit about an ECG. Because the Apple Watch also does an ECG. Now, what is an ECG? If you look at the screen on the top right here, you'll see our first ECG machine was in 1860. Well, I believe in 1860, they were still burning witches at the stake. So can you imagine this poor guy here being told by his doctor to be hooked up to this machine where he had one foot in the water and he was connected to all these electrical things? The reason is, though, is that we knew for very early on that if we measured the electrical potential in the heart, we could figure out how your heart was doing. So on the left side of the screen here, you'll see where many of you have had ECGs. You go to the doctor, they put all these little squiggly things on you, and then it prints out this very complicated piece of paper at the bottom here. And when we look at this, this is important as physicians because we can tell what happened in the past to your heart. By looking at these funny little lines, we can tell what's happened to the past. We can tell presently if there's a problem. A lot of people come in with chest pain. We want to find out if they have a heart attack. We do an ECG. And we can also talk about the future. We can tell if your heart's going to perform well in the future. So by doing an ECG, we can tell past, present, and future. Well, the Apple Watch does an ECG, if you can believe it. It does indeed. The Apple Watch, if you touch the crown up here, you'll see that on the crown, you'll see this little button here. You just touch that, and that records an ECG on your watch, which sends it to the iPhone, and this is sort of what it looks like. Now, this is the ECG that the doctor does in the hospital. This is the ECG on the Apple phone. Not the same thing. This is a much more simplistic thing, but if you are having a very slow heartbeat or a very fast heartbeat, to do an ECG does document what is happening, and you can go and get further tests. It's certainly not the same ECG that we do in the hospital, but this is possible to be done with the Apple Watch. Now, just to remind everybody, of course, the Apple Watch works with an iPhone. So gosh darn it, you know, if you don't have an iPhone, and you need an iPhone and you need a watch for this process to work. You need actually both of these devices. So what to do if you have an Android device? Again, this is what your Apple Watch would show you. It would show you atrial fibrillation occurring. Now, one of the things I like to mention to everybody, and this is a little dated now, but because of the significance of this device now, healthcare plans actually subsidize you for purchasing the Apple Watch. And if you have any of these healthcare plans, then these plans actually subsidize and will pay for the Apple Watch if you have an iPhone. So I would, and I expect this probably has, the value in this is so significant in preventing stroke, primarily stroke, or in Mary's case, a fall and hip fracture, that the healthcare providers are real anxious to get you monitoring your pulse. So if you're one of these, then I would encourage you to talk to them, because they will be able to help you with that. Now, for the Android watch, for the Android group, because of course we're not all Apple people, for the Android group, the one that's a comparable one is called the Galaxy Active 2. This is made by Samsung, and this has the atrial fibrillation detection in it. However, it hasn't been passed by the FDA yet, so it is not turned on. We're waiting for the announcement that this will be turned on. You can buy this watch now at Best Buy. This was $269. This works on it with an Android phone, and this does have the atrial fibrillation detection as an Android service, but it's not turned on yet. We expect that any day now. Now, I wanted to talk about AliveCor. AliveCor is a company founded by Dr. Albert. It's a big company, and they actually had atrial fibrillation detection long before Apple came along. They have developed a little different process, and I wanted to tell you about the company and what they do. Now, this device is a portable ECG machine that you can actually purchase. I have one I can show you guys afterwards. On most of my presentations where I come to the clubs, I bring this with you and I do ECGs on everybody afterwards. So this is available for $99 on Amazon, and I'm just going to show you how it works. There's a little video here, and I want to play this, and this is really an interesting device. So watch the video. So that is a device that usually when I do this presentation, there's people often are heading off to the store before the presentation's finished to buy an Apple Watch. But the other thing that a lot of people do is they buy this device, and again, it works with the Apple Watch. It's a device that has an app that goes on the Apple Watch or an Android, and you can monitor your pulse yourself. And this device is $99, and it will do that electrocardiogram for you. It tells you, it interprets it. It'll tell you if your heart is too fast. It'll tell you if your heart is too slow, and it'll tell you if you have atrial fibrillation. So this is a very simple device. I have one here. I use this, and it's a great device. Now, and this is just and this is what it looks like. It does the same type of ECG that the Apple Watch does. Now, you're all wondering what I wondered as well when I started looking at this. One of the problems with mobile devices like the Apple Watch or the Samsung Watch is that it needs to be approved by each country, the FDA or whatever the approval body is in each country. Now, Apple has been going on with the Apple Watch for quite a while now, and they have the Apple Watch approved in most countries around the world. Samsung's just starting that with their Active 2, but they have to go to Canada. They have to go to Canada's regulatory body. They have to get it approved. Then they have to go to Britain, and they have to do it in Britain. They have to do it. So it's a laborious task to go all around the world to have this done with each device. So what AliveCor did is they said, okay, why don't we do something a little different? Why don't we take the data from all the devices? So it doesn't matter if you have a Garmin or if you have a Samsung or if you have an Apple Watch. It does not matter what device you have. We have an app called Cardiogram, and what we'll do is we will take the data from those things and we will take it to our big servers in the United States. They're monitoring about 750,000 people now, and they take all the data and they analyze it through artificial intelligence in their big computers. And then they notify you and your doctor if there's any problem. So they're constantly monitoring you. And this is what the fella who I saved his life, who actually, he had a Garmin, and he downloaded this app and turned it on. I think it's about $3 a month they charge. And it was the information from this app called Cardiogram that was sent to his doctor and himself that made him go to the hospital, and it saved his life. So this is life-saving. Now this is my Cardiogram. This is this occurred in July. Now, if you look at this, this is the graph. This is my graph here, and watch what happened here. About between 7 in the morning and 8:30, all of a sudden, look at my pulse rate. It went really, really, really high. Now, this is very unusual. Look at the rest of the day. It's much lower, and things this is sort of my normal thing was happening. But what happened in this situation here? Well, and I got a notification from AliveCor saying, hey, there's something wrong here. What is happening? Well, in this particular case, I was golfing. I golf with a 9-hole group, and I like to walk. So I was walking around the golf course golfing, and that's why my pulse was up. But had I had shortness of breath, had I had chest pain, had I had some problem, AliveCor would have notified me, and this could be a very worrisome thing if you weren't in good health. So this is the type of thing that they monitor, and they will send the data right to your health insurance company, your doctor, and also notify you. So this is an interesting project, and I think very worthwhile. And what we're looking at with these mobile devices now is the next stage will be ambulatory blood sugar monitoring, which is the next phase of what's going to be happening. And this, of course, will change how diabetes is looked after now. This was announced this year, or I guess January of 2020. Yeah, January 24th, 2020. This group of researchers was able to actually measure blood sugar without doing any physical pricks to not actually taking the actual blood. This had never been done before. And they did it with this machine, and it's called a Raman spectroscopy. And this is the machine that they developed, and they actually now can do your accurate blood sugar with without actually monitoring your blood. Now, all we have to do is make this machine into an Apple Watch, and you will have one of the most successful devices ever known to mankind. And that will, I expect, probably will happen very shortly as we move ahead with this. So the goal of this presentation today was to show you how important it is to watch for a slow heartbeat. Because if you have a slow heartbeat, you might need a pacemaker. Again, very common after the age of 60. It's also to identify a very rapid heartbeat and identify atrial fibrillation to get it treated. Because if you don't treat it, you could have a stroke, and that's a very bad thing. And just to remember, for the slow heartbeat, it starts at 60, and look at the graph. This is exactly what you're going to expect. It is what happened to Mary is very, very, very common. And again, atrial fibrillation, age 60, and again goes up very, very high as you get older. So to stay healthy, so we don't have strokes, we don't have things happening like happened to Mary, we need to monitor our pulse. And the best way to monitor your pulse is through one of those devices. Whether you have an Apple Watch or whether you have a Fitbit or whether you have a Garmin, is wear a device that will actually monitor your pulse. My next presentation that I'm working on now is how Mary could have been better prepared by using some of the Internet of Things devices to have in her house. Clearly, one of Mary's disadvantages is she lived alone, and particularly she lived in a resort where there's nobody there in the summer. So there are a lot of things Mary could have done to be better prepared. So if she did have a fall, she could have got help quicker, and that's my next presentation that I'm just writing now. So more to come on that. So when I gave my talk at one of the resorts, one of the fellas said, "You know the moral of your talk?" And I said, "What?" He said, "An apple a day keeps the doctor away." So I thought that was pretty funny, and I put that in my presentation. So I'm gonna stop sharing now, and I'm going to I'll open the mics up, and if you have any questions, we can certainly talk. And I'll unmute everybody, and we can have a chat. Any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, Ron. On that little chart that you showed where the atrial fibrillation seems to go up after 60,
yep.
Then it seems like it starts to go back down after 80. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, you're dead.
Yeah, I know. Other than
it's just because there's so fewer people. I think there's just so few. There's just a lot less people. But
so it's not because there's.
Nah, I don't think so. I think all the people that didn't get diagnosed are all dead by now. Yeah.
I heard an interesting article on BBC World News this morning where a company in San Diego is combining results from the Fitbit and the Apple Watches as a possible detection device for the COVID-19 by doing heart rates.
That's a live core. Is that? That's a live core. Yeah. I was going to mention that. I should have put it in the presentation, but that's a live core. That's exactly the company and exactly the technology they're using. Because remember when I showed you, COVID-19 does hit the heart muscle, and it can affect the heart muscle, and that's a very serious problem. And that usually shows with a heart rate abnormality, so they're able to look at that. And so that's the technology. So yeah, it's exciting. So the goal is everybody is that you really should try and monitor your heart, and you want to know if your heart's too slow or too fast. And there's lots of different devices out there you can wear. Personally, If I had an iPhone, I would buy an Apple Watch. There's no doubt in my mind. Exactly. Janine's got one. Yeah. I mean, if is that a Series 5?
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you have the atrial fibrillation turned on?
yeah, I did it while you were talking.
Turn it on.
Good for you.
I do not have AFib.
Well, no, but that's good because I will tell you, I've done this presentation on maybe 20, 30 clubs, and mostly while I'm talking, people are already ordering their Apple Watch online. There's always 3 or 4 that said, yeah, I just got one. I'm going to go down to Best Buy and pick it up. So they're, you know, there's no doubt in my mind, if I had an iPhone, I would buy an Apple Watch as fast as you know what, but I don't use I have an Android phone. So I have a Fitbit, right? And so this is my Fitbit, and I have a live core monitoring it. And if I developed atrial fibrillation or something like that, then that would be something that I would, you know, I'll get treated. Now I will, my next watch though, will be the Samsung Active 2. Well, it won't be the Active 2 because I am sure they're going to bring out an Active 3, right? Like as soon as it gets approved and as soon as this atrial fibrillation gets turned on, they're going to bring the Active 3 out. But I will buy the Active 3. I'll buy the Samsung watch because it will have an approved atrial fibrillation detection on it.
They're both going on my birthday list.
Yeah, just be careful on the Samsung watch. Just don't buy it, because just wait till it gets approved. And I think there's a Samsung Active 3 coming out.
You know, also, I read there was an article out a while back that I guess Apple and Google are actually going to start working together on this. So whatever they're going to come up with, they'll work on both.
Well, that blood sugar monitoring issue that will make, you just have no idea, that's going to make Apple twice as rich as they are right now. It's going to be insane. Like that will change the whole way we monitor diabetes. So it's going to happen. And I would expect maybe Google and Apple will work, and whoever develops that technology and can take that machine and make that machine into a watch. Can you imagine getting all your blood sugar stuff done, and it would not be pricking your wrist or fingers, and it would all be storing it right on your watch? I mean, that would be insane. Like that's exactly how you would manage diabetes. So it's definitely going to be the way we're going. There was an article that came out yesterday that apparently Samsung Active 2 has a way of measuring your blood pressure. Now, there's a lot of crap about blood pressure, and there's really no really good way that a watch can measure blood pressure. Well, there is one company has it, and they actually have a blood pressure band within the watch. So when you take your blood pressure, it actually inflates the cuff around your wrist and does your blood pressure like that. But most of the claims are all bogus, and you really can't do that. But they have developed a new technology, which is just announced last week, and Samsung has the technology where they can actually get your blood pressure from the arterial wave that's formed, and that's how they do that's how they measure your pulse. And it's all new. Don't know anything about it yet, but this is a new thing that's coming along that we'll probably see accurate blood pressure being done with watches as well.
Yeah, it's the whole problem with these things is to, you have to, one, make sure they're approved, and two, my rule has always been to wait 6 months to a year, make sure they got the bugs out of them before you put all that money into it.
Yeah. Now the other thing too. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention. Apple. So we know that the Apple Watch can diagnose atrial fibrillation. We know that. But what we don't know is if we gave 100,000 people the Apple Watch, would it actually identify atrial fibrillation? Would they go to the doctor? Would they get treated? And would it be beneficial to their health? There has never been a study that shows that. So Apple is looking for 100,000 people want seniors. This is the one time people want seniors. So if you go to the Apple, store, if you go to the Apple website, you'll see it's called the Heart Health Study, and they're looking for 100,000 seniors. You need to have an Apple Watch 6 or better, and you apply, and if you get enrolled in the study, then you'll actually get an Apple Watch. It's a 3-year study, and they're going to do a 3-year study, so you'll have to do some monitoring and some things for them, but you actually get you'll get a free Apple Watch, or a subsidized one. So it's on the Apple website.
Do you have to have a previous to this? Because I'm interested. The previous requirement is you have to have an Apple phone, right?
Yes, you have to have an iPhone. So the requirements are you need an iPhone of a 6, I think it's 6S or better, right? So you need an iPhone. You have to be a senior, and you have to be a resident of the United States and eligible for Medicare. You have to be those 3. Canadians are out, you can't do it, and so you have to have those 3 issues. And it's the, I think it's called, just a minute here, Apple. I'll look it up. I should have put it in this presentation. It's in one of my presentations. I'll send it to you. I just don't, I think it's the, I think it's the Apple Heart trial. I just don't see it here. But I think it's on the Apple website, but I'll send it to you, Jim, and you can send it out to everybody. It's just a website you go to and you can self-enroll.
Okay, good. Any other questions for Ron, guys, ladies, gentlemen?
And don't forget, this is on the, if you want to share it, if you want to look at it again, it's just on it's on YouTube. So the whole presentation's on YouTube as well.
Yeah, you go to YouTube APCUG videos,
Yep.
and they'll have the whole list.
Find it that way, or if you type in Ron Brown, you'll probably find it as well.
Yeah, now be sure, Ron, let me know when you finish part 2 of this, so we can have you back.
I know everybody's on my case about that. You know, they're all wanting part 2, and my problem is I've got this tech for seniors that I'm doing now, and it's a show, and then I've got all these other presentations, and you know, I don't care about COVID-19. The fact I don't leave my house, I never leave my house. I just I work all the time, so I'm working on it. It's coming. It's coming. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to show that I wanted to show that all the IoT devices, Internet of Things devices, such as the, you know, the Amazon Echo, you know, that you could have as a senior, you could have in your homes that would provide better protection, so that when Mary fell and she got jammed between the toilet and the shower, if she'd had an Echo in her device around her, she could have yelled help, and she could have said, Alexa, call Meg, or something like that, and you know, she would have got help, right? So yeah, so that my echo's yapping at me now, so
Mine's
Marie,
talking.
turn your echo off.
yeah, so there's lots of things that could be, done, right? And so we have to look at all those that would help.
Yeah, well, I make it a habit that my phone goes with me absolutely everywhere, and that includes the bathroom. And since I have a Samsung, you could yell out, you know, hey Google, and then call whatever the number you want, and it works.
Yeah, you could. But when you got up for the pee at 2 in the morning, would you take your phone?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's an option. That's an option.
I've had falls.
Exactly.
And look at them that it's, you know, if I didn't hate Apple, I probably would have bought the Apple Watch and the phone just for the accelerometer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Anne Marie.
Yeah, I have AFib, as you could see, right? And I'm under treatment for it. But I'm worried about my husband because he's over 80 and he gets all lightheaded when he gets up all the time. He should probably wear a device because I would think that his blood pressure and his heart rate is very low when he gets so lightheaded. I would think
Or
every
it could
time
be
he
fast.
exerts.
It
Pardon?
could be either way. It could be fast or slow. Lightheadedness could be fast or slow.
Well, you should probably get one of these things then.
Yeah, you know, you really want it because if you have atrial fibrillation, you know, as you know, you can have a stroke with it. So you need to have that treated.
They
And
got me on the blood thinner and on the blood pressure pill, and you know.
Exactly. That's right. And the other thing that's handy too is that if you are on medication for atrial fibrillation, your Apple Watch will tell you if you ever go back into atrial fibrillation, right? Most of the time we want to keep you out of atrial fibrillation, but it will monitor you and sort of say, okay, well, you did real good. In the last 6 months, you've had no episodes of atrial fibrillation. Or it would say, gee whiz, you're getting 2 or 3 attacks of atrial fibrillation a week or something. So it's a good monitoring system for your doctor as well.
I would have to wear it day and night because if I get them at night.
Well, yeah.
Just wear your watch.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'd have to wear the watch day and night.
Yeah. I wear my watch all day. I don't wear it. I should wear it at night, but I should, you know. But that's something I've got to work on. But you should wear it 24 hours a day.
Yeah, well, partially, you know, Anne-Marie, every senior, particularly, when you're getting up from a laying down position, should sit up and just stay there instead of coming up and standing immediately and let your body equalize, you know, with the blood pressure. I'll give you another tip. You'll love this one, Ron. I learned this from martial arts. In Wing Chun, they call it the goat pinning stance. It's when you put your feet down, just turn your toes in. And then when you stand up, you really cannot fall forward.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, just try them. You know, turn your toes in or your heels out, so you're pigeon-toed.
Oh.
And it's very, very difficult to fall forward.
Well, it's great we have this technology nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really cool. And so lots of changes. And as I said, this one fellow, the resort I gave a talk to, he had a live course Cardiogram. He downloaded the app and put it on his phone, and they notified him right away when he got into trouble. He went to the hospital, and the doctor said, if you hadn't come in, you'd be dead tonight. So that was that critical. So it makes you feel good when you can actually do something for people.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do you choose amongst the watches? For instance, like with the Fitbit, there's not just one Fitbit. There's a whole bunch, aren't there?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch. You know, the Fitbit technology is always going to change because Google bought Fitbit and they want to change it to more of a medical device like Apple. So you're going to see huge changes in the Fitbit. If you can buy a Fitbit for $60-70, so if you want to buy just in the short term, if you want to buy a device that just will measure your pulse, then I wouldn't spend a lot of money on a Fitbit. It's all good. That technology will all change within the year. That's all going to be different because Google bought it, and they're going to bring out the same type of technology that Apple and Samsung have. They want to be in that medical monitoring market. They want to be in that type of thing. So it's all going to change.
Question.
Yeah.
They have real cheap devices, little armbands and stuff that measure pulse rate, and their pedometers. They're probably not good enough, are they?
That's fine. Yeah, all you want to know is if that's not a problem. I mean, all we want to know is if you feel dizzy and you look at your whatever device you have and it says, gee whiz, your pulse is 45, then when you go to your doctor, you say, gee whiz, my pulse was 45 and I felt dizzy. Now, even a first-year medical student would know that means you need a pacemaker, right? I mean, that's a no-brainer. But if you don't know that key piece of information, then it's hard for the doctor to make that assertion, because there are many reasons why you might be dizzy. There's thousands of reasons, but if you tell them your pulse was 45, that means you need a pacemaker.
We had a friend who fainted on a cruise ship in the shower, and he was way in the 80s, 88 or something like that. And they said, "Oh, you have the flu." Next time he fainted, they figured out he needed a pacemaker.
Right. Well, if you get up to be 80 and you faint, I mean, there's a really, really high probability that you need a pacemaker. You saw the graphs there. It goes up significantly, and you get to be 80. If you get dizzy, that's a really common problem.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm staying at 39.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else have questions for Ron?
And don't forget about, just hold on a second. This is the mobile ECG. I think I've got it.
I wrote it down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Cardiogram. This is the device here. I've got it in a little. I've got it in a little case, right? But this is $99, and you buy this on Amazon, and you just put your two fingers on both sides like this, and it'll measure your pulse. So this is a great little device, and it does what the Apple Watch does. It's just as good as the Apple Watch, and this is made by AliveCor, which is the company that did the. And don't forget about the app called Cardiogram. You just go to the web store, go to iOS, or you can go to Android, and you can use the app. It's $3 a month. It's called Cardiogram by AliveCor, and it will it will monitor your pulse as well for you, and it'll tell if it's too fast or too slow.
Oh, okay. One more question. I thought it was EKG. Now it's called ECG.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Just depends on which side of the tracks you're on.
Yeah.
Are you a cardio with a K or a cardio with a C?
I guess.
It's the same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. But yeah. So these are really interesting devices. It's funny because I get asked back to a lot of resorts to do another presentation, and everyone's coming by and they're showing me their Apple Watch, or they're showing me their device they bought. It's really a lot of fun. They've all got their devices in it. It's interesting. So, but it does save lives.
Yeah. You save lives by telling us.
Yeah,
Wow.
for sure. Yeah. Thank you for that.
All right.
Any other questions?
No, but thank you.
All right. Well, so I'm going to leave the meeting then, Jim. Now let me just see here. If I can. I'm just going to leave the meeting. You guys keep talking, okay? I'll leave the meeting, and then Jim, whoever the last person out, just turn the lights out, okay? Just close the meeting. Just end the meeting for all, and then I'll send you the link with the tape, okay, Jim?
Okay, thanks, Ron. We really appreciate you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was interesting.
Yeah, isn't it?
It's sort of scary in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.